respectfully acknowledge that the Art Gallery of Peterborough is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina First Islands. The Art Gallery of Peterborough respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We are located on the shores of Little Lake, a traditional portage location for the Anishinaabe, a place along a journey, a part of conveyance. The story came to us through Doug Williams, who shared it with William Kingfisher and others during preparations for an Otominguizas festival some years ago. These stories are so valuable to us. They connect us to the roots of this place, to its intentions and its people, and inform our own actions as we strive to continue to offer a place of respite and pause. This exhibition is a journey too. Not only is it, in part, an actual documentation of a very special journey, it charts a notable transition and moment in Pierre's practice. I first met Pierre when I was fairly new to Peterborough and new to my own arts career. And I was invited to write an essay for Vantage Points, which was an exhibition of Pierre's work along with Marilyn Goslin here in the main gallery. Back in 2010? I should have looked it up. We think 2010. It was such a treat to be welcomed into his studio, seeing his place of work, and listening to his stories, the things that inspired him, and what he ended up doing with those sparks. And what an incredible joy to be able to revisit this work. A few years ago, Pierre let us in on a little secret. He had been invited to travel on the Algoma Harvester and was creating a body of work out of that experience. We were immediately intrigued and wanted to know more, and offered a way for him to indulge this work by planning a solo exhibition. And from there, Pierre continued to push, and this incredible work is the result of that time. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today as we celebrate Pierre Christensen's Landscapes of Conveyance and the forthcoming publication with writing by myself, John Wadland, and Pierre, and beautifully designed by Matt Stimson, who's in the back, being shy, but he can wave. Yay! Though the physical copies are still on their way, bear with us. We are thrilled to be celebrating this incredible body of work with a panel conversation, bringing together the artist along with John Wadland, the writer and moderator, Spencer J. Harrison. I want to begin just with a few other thank yous, of course, to our sponsors, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the City of Peterborough. I also want to note that masks are optional. The panel won't be wearing masks in an effort to be more clearly heard. There will be an opportunity for you all to ask questions towards the end of the panel, and we'll invite you all to stay. Hang out, chat, join us in the shop upstairs for light refreshments. We'll work quickly to get the chairs out of the way. What may be counterintuitive, but please don't help us. It's easier for us to do it and safer for the art as well. And of course, do continue to visit us. This exhibition continues on until October 16th, so there's much more time to return. And then get your name on the list upstairs, and we'll connect with you to have copies as we get them. We'll get those physical copies to you. And of course, pick up our It's All About Art preview card, one of these. Pop it on your fridge and get it in your calendars. Our annual fundraising art auction begins again. Bidding opens on October 21st. We've got lots of art on offer, including a beautiful piece by Pierre and a beautiful piece by Spencer. So keep your eyes open. It is presented this year by our major sponsor, LLF Lawyers. So, my ups and downs. I'll just begin by introducing the panel, and then I'll turn it over to Spencer, who's going to take it from there. Yeah. Pierre Christensen has been working in the medium of oil paint for over 35 years. Probably, we should update that, over 35 years. Over 40 years. The classical technique of building up successive opaque and transparent paint layers yield this luminosity that has come to define his style. Christensen applies this technique effectively to his subject matter that ranges from commonplace objects to urban and industrial landscapes. Pier was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, and moved to Canada in 1959 as a child. He's lived in Peterborough since 1985, where he maintains an active studio practice. He studied classical oil painting with Anthony Bourne and completed a course in paper conservation, both through the University of Victoria in BC. And he has also been involved in the gallery in the picture framing business for over 35 years. It's been kind of a loss, but we're still going a little bit. But it allows you to continue and focus more on this, which we're so grateful for. An active member of the community, Pier has served as a member of the City of Peterborough's Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee, which is not an easy job. It's a bit thankless. Interesting job. Arts, Culture, and Heritage Advisory Committee and the Peterborough Regional Health Center's Arts Committee. And he's been invited to speak in lectures and seminars all across Canada, and was elected to membership of the Ontario Society of Artists in 2018. We're also joined by John Wedland, who I'm just so thrilled that he said yes to this project. He's a professor emeritus of Canadian Studies at Trent University, where he taught from 1972 to 2008. And among other subject areas, he pursued a long-held research interest in visual culture, offering a course on the topic for several years. W.J.T. Mitchell's vexing questions, "What do pictures want?" inspired much of his thinking for this catalog essay, and he, like Mitchell, continues to wrestle with the implications of images. And then Spencer J. Harrison is an artist, activist, and educator who lives and works in Toronto, but is still very involved in Peterborough. We see him here a lot. Yeah, I kind of love it, yeah. His work has been exhibited and collected locally, nationally, and internationally, including here at the Art Gallery of Peterborough, where his most recent solo exhibition, Not a Freak Show, Growing Up Gay in Rural Ontario, showed in, 2017? Yeah. Spencer is currently an instructor in the Department of Drawing and Painting at Wilcott University, and is the co-founder of Camp Firefly Ontario, a camp for LGBTQ to S and A youth. It's just my great joy to turn the mic over to Spencer. Thank you.
Very early on, when I was learning to be a scholar, I don't really call myself a scholar, but learning to be a scholar, I had the privilege of John Wadland telling me that I should locate myself within my research. So I always, when I'm in this situation, want to locate myself. Why am I actually at the front of the room? I'm just the guy who's going to ask some questions. However, I have a really long relationship with Pier. My first solo commercial exhibition was at Pier's gallery on Dublin Street. And yeah, I don't know Pier. Something like that. Something like that. But I knew Pier's work really well at that point, and I kind of imagined I always wanted to grow up and be as good as Pier, even though we're pretty close in age. Later in my life, I went on to do my master's in Canadian Heritage and Development Studies at Trent, where I met John Wadland, and I started to read John Wadland's work. And I thought, as a scholar, if I really do this well, I hope that I will be, when I grow up, like John Wadland. So when we were talking about this exhibition, I asked if I could be in this situation. I wanted to be the person to moderate it because I'm very aware of how sometimes artists and sometimes scholars are put in these distanced places where people aren't sure how to have a conversation with them, look at them, think about them, talk about them. So I thought if I did it, I might be able to break some of that down. I imagined it like we would be sitting at the three of us, having a beer and having a conversation about the work. The beer is a bit lacking, but if you'll try to imagine it in that way, the only thing that's a bit different is that I will have some notes that I'm going to work from. And apparently John has brought some notes. He doesn't know what the questions are. How does he know what the answers are? I wanted to start with words that John reminded us of. These are words of Piers. And he said, and so in the catalog you will soon get, he will tell you that his heart is always with the workers, in the everyday, on the street, or near the engines. And my first impression when I walked into this exhibition was about work, was about how much work is on the walls in the gallery. It's quite astounding to me. And I wonder if you, Pierre, could start and talk about how did you go about making this much work? Because it's a massive amount of work.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly is. And, oh, we're using this. Yes, it is a massive amount of work. And I think it happens if you actually are in the studio painting every day, a lot of work gets done. Not purposefully necessarily. A lot of work gets done in an exhibition such as this. I mean, this whole series is part of the basis, but we were able to go back and, especially up on the ramp, you'll see a number of pieces that are quite a few years old, but have worked themselves into the theme of this show. It's something I've been concerned with and interested in for many, many years. The industrial landscape has always been one of my inspirations. The studio tour was last weekend. I had somebody in the studio and they were looking at a small painting I have upstairs, and it's a nighttime scene of a small tugboat kind of thing in Victoria Harbour, Inner Harbour in Victoria. And we were looking at it, and I suddenly realized the date on this is 1983. And it struck me, good heavens, that's almost 40 years ago. And I have no idea how that came to pass. And so really, it's this whole, it is a lot of work, Spencer, but it doesn't, I don't count it as work as such. It's more of just a working out is more of it. Working out the ideas I get and just the culmination of what you see on the walls here.
The thing that I noticed most about this work when I first encountered it is a word that you use as well is luminosity. I think luminosity is really important, and I wonder if you could talk about luminosity. And then I'm going to ask John to talk about the light that he sees in the work.
Well, now I guess we get into technical aspects of my work. When I studied painting in Victoria with Anthony Thorne, it was at first it was offered as a 12-week course, an extension course through the university, which I took, and it was one of those lovely things. You met in his studio once a week. It started out, I think, with 12 students. The following week, there were 9 students. The following, there might have been 6 or 7. And I think there was maybe 5 or 6 who completed the whole thing. But it was one of those situations. I was very fortunate to have that teacher-student relationship that just clicked. I understood what he was saying and was able to put it into practice. Bringing back my work week after week, he would critique and offer suggestions. And it was just, I went on studying privately after that 12 weeks for almost 3 years, only stopping because we moved back to Peterborough. But he taught the classical technique, and basically, if you look at any of the paintings here, very, very thin layers of paint. I do not keep paint companies in business. I have tubes of paint that are easily 30 years old and still good to go. But it involves building up a painting, starting from the preliminary sketch, which is usually, in my case, done in black, and then going through successive opaque and transparent layers and just refining that original sketch into what you see now. But it's through the use of the transparent layers. So you have to think, when you're putting something down, you have to think of what's coming on top. So I admire painters who can take their gear, go outside, set up, and finish a painting in a matter of hours. The result can be beautiful. I don't work like that, so it's more of a deliberate, you might say, if that's the right word, But it is creating that sense of light, the sense of, I'm trying to convey a sense of reality to the viewer, that what you're looking at possibly could be real. And I find that regardless of the subject matter that I'm painting, because I do florals, I do urban landscapes, I do pure landscapes as well, but it's always that the quality of light that I pursue in the work. And I think you can see it effectively, for instance, in the late summer evening going through Quebec City here. I want to capture that quality of that warm summer evening. Oh, don't we all wish we were there? And I think I did, and that's the case in so many of the paintings. Some are more inclement. There's winter. Yeah.
So John, in your writing, you talked about light. You talked about the light in the space. Could you just expand on that? Knowing that they haven't got to read the gorgeous catalog that I've got to read.
Well, first of all, I have to confess that I'm not an art historian. I'm a historian who likes art and has tried to spend some time thinking about its role in our history. I guess I'd begin by saying, and my wife, Julia, who's here today, will cringe when I begin this observation. I recently read a book review of a collection of short stories by Alexander MacLeod. Some of you may have read it in the Literary Review of Canada. A wonderful review by a guy named Alan Hepburn, who teaches at McGill. And he was trying to explain why this collection of short stories was, he thought, parallel to anything written by Alice Munro. And so he diverged to talk about what you do as a writer when you're trying to write a short story that's 20 pages long but has to encapsulate so much. And he came up with, and why this particular author was so successful at doing this. And he used a phrase which has rung in my head ever since I read it. He said that the sentences in this book are luminous with implication. I think that's such a beautiful phrase, luminous with implication. And that's what this work is for me. It's luminous with implication. I'm as a historian, I'm a storyteller. I'm interested in story, in the way we tell our stories, the way in which we articulate what our past has been and how it has made us into what we are now. But it is full of sidebars and side stories. When you look at a painting, it's not just a painting of a grain elevator or the deck of a ship. It's a thing that's trying to speak to you about myriad other things. And as the viewer of the work, it's your responsibility to step beyond the work itself, but look to where the work is taking you. And what questions does it raise for you? What sort of things will you have to think about in order fully to understand why this work is here? That's what luminosity means to me.
Could we talk about the camera? So Pearse speaks of his camera as being his sketchbook, as a device that he uses to sketch. And John also notes this in the catalog in a conversation. So if I could ask both of you to speak about the sketchbook camera. How is it a sketchbook?
It's a sketchbook because inspiration often comes to me very quickly. I'll see something. I mean, in the past, anything from, I once saw a reflection in the rear view mirror of my car. I think I was going up Stewart Street or something like that. And just instantly thought, that'll make a great painting. And I went back after getting out of the car and such with my camera and recording just that image. And this often happens. I'll see something and think, that would be a great painting. And my work has always been done in the studio. I have done sketching out of doors. That's a quick way of recording things as well. But since all the work is done in the studio, I go out purposely with a camera to go sketching, to find things that I can translate into painting later. The camera also allows me, I don't consider myself a photographer. I have very little knowledge of the technical aspects, all the little dials and fidgets that you have on your camera. I'm more of a point and shoot kind of guy, primarily because I'm simply concerned when I'm capturing an image with the camera, I'm concerned with the composition. I have to those who might be interested, an 80 to 200 lens, which I can zoom, and I can compose the image very, very quickly and take a shot of that. Once I'm back in the studio, that's what I use. Again, the lighting, the contrast aren't the most important thing because as an artist, I wield the incredible power of changing night to day, summer to winter. It's great for the ego to have that power. So I often use it simply for composition purposes, but then I will contrive the actual lighting in the piece. Not in all cases, in a lot of cases such as these were the times of day that I wanted to depict. But other times to increase the drama, you'll see one on the ramp on the way up of the grain terminals in Thunder Bay. They were actually photographed during the day, and it was summer. There's another one further up of Nefton Mines. I went up there on board that train, and that was in the summer as well, but I've changed it to winter because the landscape, the trees block out so much. So often the winter landscape I find is much more appealing to me when I'm trying to depict a certain image, and it just raises the rawness of a scene more.
And so, John, can you just talk about why you thought that was a significant thing to note and talk about in the catalog? Because I think it tells us a lot.
Well, the paintings, for me, I was always interested in the dates when they were painted, which suggested to me that the growth of this artist as he's working through the things that he's seeing and the stories that he's trying to tell. And I found that the photograph wasn't just the sketch pad, or the camera wasn't just the sketch pad. It seemed to me that as you look at the work and you realize that you're seeing pictures painted not in a sequence, but let's look at them in a sequence. That we move from some what do we call them? This is when I'm not an artist comes shining through. We'll say a blank page, a single image. What we see here, for example, are something that really fascinated me was the grid. I'm really interested in the grid. And this was something that really was taught to Peer. It's a great way to put a painting together because you look at the photograph and then you divide it up into its component parts by equal parts. And you can see here, there are 15 images in this particular piece and this one as well. And this one, how many here? 9 here. Put together separately. Each one essential to the whole. But they constitute, from my observation of Peer's work, a growth, a change. And they move on eventually into photographs like the OOCL painting at the back page, where the images are actually, the photograph isn't just something from which the artist has worked to create the image. The photographs have actually got right into the painting, right? And the painting is united. Its parts, which are those photographs, are united by the brush of the painter. They are linked together. But the thing that really strikes me about in some ways you'll have to read the catalog to sort of get the point I'm making, but
what's important to me is that progressively the edges become harder. Once those photographs get right into the painting, there's something, I think, that's part of the image that you really need to be thinking about, because there's a critical implication in that work, because the edge hardens, and that OOCL container ship owned by the Chinese state is a lot different than the painting of a laker on Lake Ontario that is moving in our country and bringing its project, its contents to be made into something. This container ship is moving things that have already been made into that thing. They are corporate capitalism. They are these container ship. This container ship here carries, for me, the power and implication of
great power of globalization. It's a strength, it's a power, but it doesn't have, for me, the soul of the paintings of these spots that find their way into the paintings of the ship on which Peer is actually traveling, witnessing the art, witnessing the people who are actually making this boat go through the locks, over a complex terrain, through a seaway that has cost the lives of a lot of people in its making, a transition, a landscape in transition, a landscape that has been made, followed the trajectory of traditional peoples in the Canot de Maître during the heyday of the Hudson's Bay Company. The same territory, but we're not witnessing a canoe that you can pick up and portage across with a load of furs that can be portaged across a long portage and put back in the boat and paddled off to Montreal from deep into the recesses of the country. We're witnessing a whole landscape that has been shaped to accommodate huge boats which are going to carry iron ore and salt and well, the myriad things, magnesium, that are going to be somebody else's landscape has been moved somewhere, is being moved by these boats to a destination where they will be made into some other kind of landscape. And when you look at the Welland Canal, you have to understand that what you're witnessing is a portage that's carrying shipping over the Niagara Escarpment. That's a long way up and a long way down. There's a power in that is mirrored in these landscapes. But the power, as I've said, in the softness of this work and the hardness of that work are also speaking to us powerfully about the world we're living in. Sorry, I've gone on a bit long.
I'm going to let you go on when you need to go on. And you've actually led me directly to where I wanted to go next, which was the grid. And I wanted you to talk about the grid. Can you explain how you use the grid, why you use the grid, how it appears within the work, and somewhat about how the photographs end up in the work as well? So if you forget the last part, I'll bring you back in.
Yeah, when we speak of the grid, it's obviously apparent in these. I think it started out, I recall my teacher, Anthony Thorne, critiquing one of my paintings so many years ago, looking at it, and he was saying, a painting, you should be able to cut into small pieces and end up with successful small paintings, regardless of how abstract they become. Or even if you take a piece and blow it up, it can become an abstract painting. He said this in reference to that within a painting there should be many interesting places for the viewer's eye to go. So you don't see necessarily the whole at once, that there are elements that continue to intrigue, continue to engage. And so in the two of these, which of course you can get up and look at after, it's made up of a number of smaller canvases. And I did this with a number of years ago, experimenting. But each one of these small canvases could be removed, hung on the wall, and it could become a successful small painting. In some cases, very abstract, maybe just a diagonal line going through the canvas. And that's where that led from. The one behind me, it is in 9 separate pieces, but it was primarily so I could get it out of the studio.
Some of it's just practical.
That's
Some
right.
of it's just practical.
Yes, yeah. It's led me into my use of photography and painting, and that's a result of this exhibition. The joy of working with a public gallery in a public space like this, it allows me to explore concepts and ideas as they come up. I'm not painting concerned with the art fairs that I attend and will this possibly look nice in somebody's home, which I'm sure they all would regardless. But it allowed me to you get ideas as an artist. Sometimes you're faced with a blank canvas. You don't know, I've done everything I can. I'm exhausted. That's it. And then suddenly something will twig, and suddenly you're led down this whole new path of inspiration. And that's kind of what happened with these photographs. I was at first attempting to capture the scale of these machines, these wonderful large ships and trains. And it started with the one in the back, the Labrador coming out of Hamilton Harbor. I was at the ship was coming through, I had my camera, and I started just taking numerous photographs. The ship was moving as I was taking the photographs, and so the end result is there's a distortion among each photograph I took. And then piecing them together on the board that I mount them on, there's certain places that don't match up. They simply won't because the camera's aspect has changed. And so I have to start not correcting it, but filling in with paint. And I found it was a fantastic way of, again, capturing the scale of it. If I'd just taken one photograph and blown it up, it wouldn't be the same. It would be very flat. But this has now occurred over a period of time as the ship is moving, I'm moving the camera, and suddenly you get this whole other engagement, well, from my point of view, and also I've noticed from anybody viewing the works, they're intrigued by, and this is exactly the thing I was trying to accomplish. And again, just trying to capture the scale, the large one that you reference of the OOCL United Kingdom, which was the largest container ship in the world when it was built in 2018. I was fortunate, it was a trip we were on UK. I took a small ferry boat across the harbor from Felixstowe to Harwich, simply out of interest. And that's a series, I think, 32 individual photographs that I took while I was moving and the ship was stationary. But again, it kind of captured the scale of the whole piece. And I guess my intent is always to try and share the experience that I have viewing something, the initial inspiration, where that comes from, trying to get a sense of that with the engaging the viewer with that same sense of trying to put you looking down from high above onto a tug chugging along below or something like that. And again, that reflects back on what my teacher was saying, how there should be areas of interest within a painting. And that's something that sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously I'm aware of while I'm working.
There's been a debate going on around me. I've been asking all kinds of people to answer a question. When you use a very minimal, sparse, restrained, austere, concise, and I'm not sure what the word is I'm trying to come up with. My phone keeps lighting up because my husband's actually texting me other words that it could be. You do this in incredibly well in that you have tubes of paint that are, as you say, 30 years old. There's a sparseness to the amount of paint that you're using. Could you talk a little bit about that? Why do you do it? Why do you keep it so sparse? And what do you think the end result is in the sparseness of the use of paint? And note that when I'm saying that, I'm not saying you're not using enough. I'm saying, it's one thing that differs your work to my work is that there's just so little paint used.
It's not something I consciously am just very frugal with my paint.
But are you trying to save money? I don't think that's what it is. Like, no. I cannot feel that in the work at all.
No, that's not, although, again, my teacher, he said at the very beginning, if you're serious about your craft, use the best possible materials you can find. So hence, I stretch my own canvases. I can make them any size I want. I put my own gesso on because I'm in full control of the surface I'm painting on. That's important. But as far as sparseness of paint, it's simply because it's the way I have come to achieve the outcome that I have. Again, using that classical technique, it just allows a depth and a richness to the painted surface, which I cannot find another way. The other big advantage is it generally dries overnight, so I can get back on it the following day. So I am a little bit impatient sometimes about finishing a painting. And again, this lends itself to being able to work very quickly in a sense. I usually have 3 or 4 paintings going on at a time in the studio because in the course of a session in the studio, I might work 45 minutes on this and move over, work an hour on this one, and then 10 minutes on here. The following evening might be 20 minutes here, half an hour here, 45 minutes here. And so there's and I can easily be working on a big belching, shipping train or whatever, and then a sensitive landscape or still life on this other easel. It's all paint, and it all comes from the same passion, you might say. Yeah.
And then when I think about John's writing in this catalog, I can't wait till you get your hands on this catalog. So when I think about John's writing, and I've known John's writing for a really long time, I would compare him to Alistair MacLeod or Duke Redbird in the sparseness, restrained, minimal, austere, concise use of words. Like I think about Margaret Atwood. She'll fill the book with as many words as she can possibly come up with. I think about Alistair MacLeod or Duke Redbird, and they will keep it very tiny and still say as much. Why do you use so few words to say what you're saying? I had a conversation with a friend this morning about one sentence in the catalog about how beautiful it was.
Well, I'll defer to Finn in this respect that Finn said, you can say anything you want, just do it in 2,000 words. I mean, and when you're faced with this complex work, using 2,000 words to situate the work in a narrative that will make sense to you, a reader, has been a real test. I actually took 2.5 months to write those 2,000 words, and it was I just knew that there were so many things going on in this work that I had to give it the time, and I had to search. I had a lot of things to learn in order to say anything sensible about the work. It didn't come off the top of my head by any means. I had to learn a lot about some aspects of contemporary art that I hadn't really given much thought to beforehand. And yet, the more I read, the more complicated and complex it became. And I started, talking about artists like Malcolm Morley and Gerhard Richter and so on, who these are people that I'd heard about before and had maybe some passing knowledge of, but suddenly I had to find the implication that I talked about earlier, the luminous with implication, included the techniques that were being introduced progressively into the work in the time, in the timing, and associated with the timing of the artists who are contemporary, because this work is very contemporary. It's, and in its complexity, in order to convey that complexity, and the extent to which I see a real growth in the work that Peer is doing, without overdoing it, without banging you over the head with it, it's very important to find the right words. You can't just write it. It takes, sometimes I would agonize over a page, over a sentence for a whole day, just trying to get that right. I hope that comes through when you read the catalog.
The last time I heard Alistair MacLeod speak, he talked about every word in a sentence and agonizing over it. I am right in that you write like Alistair MacLeod. And you somewhat led me into where I want to go next, in that when I read the catalog and started to think about, I think of Peter as, my Peterborough artist, painter friend. When I think about wanting to move back here, the list has 10 points on it, and one of them is Peter's name. We're just local artists. However, your work gets talked about in relationship in the catalog, and I'll just read a few of them, to Van Gogh, The Group of Seven, Lucius O'Brien, Kim Ondaatje, Alex Colville, Gerhard Richter, and I agree. What did it feel like to read that? What did it feel like to actually read that?
Overwhelming. I never expected to be on the same page with illustrations of some of my heroes, absolute artistic heroes. And crazy I looked at, going through the rough copy of the catalog that we've had, and just find my work beside, on the opposite page, of Adrien Hébert, incredible Canadian artist who, my first time I saw his work, I was just flabbergasted. He worked the industrial images of 1930s Montreal, for those who wish to Google and pursue it further. So, I never really considered myself, well, I still don't consider myself in that league, but it made me aware of the relevance of what we do as artists, what we do as painters or craftspeople, in a sense. That there is a continuum throughout history, you might say, of what it is we do. And that includes writing, it includes music, it includes so many of the aspects of being human. And so I relate to it on that level, but at the same time, it's absolutely thrilling to have David Hockney in my reference in reference to my work. This is pretty incredible.
And Finn and I were talking just yesterday about John writing this and what it would be like to read that. And Finn used the word gift. It's quite a gift because it helps you understand how you fit. John, why was it important to you to write about those artists and to socially locate the work as well? I think it's a really big piece of what the catalog's about.
We had to debate the title for this exhibition. We mulled over several different options and came up finally with Landscapes of Conveyance. the whole idea of conveyance is very much with us. We're always talking about how we're going to live without the internal combustion engine fairly soon, we think or hope. For example, I'm interested. I was overwhelmed as I was doing this. I came across a beautiful essay, and I recommend it to anybody who wants to pursue this idea of conveyance. A beautiful essay by Tom Sherman in his book, which I did bring with me, Before and After the I-Bomb. There's a wonderful essay in here about Jack Chambers. And his essay, his famous painting of approaching the landscape approaching London on Highway 401. You will all, if you follow Jack Chambers, if you know Jack Chambers' work, you will know that painting. He wrote a whole essay in this book about that particular painting. It's a conveyance. Suddenly the 401, you recognize it as a conveyance. But he's saying so many things about this conveyance that takes up a whole essay to get through the impact of this work on him, and I think on many critics who feel that this generated an entire new field of exploration, what they call, I mean, you can say it's photorealism, but you can also start looking at it from Chambers' perspective. He calls it perceptual realism. It's a way of seeing that is quite unique, but it's a landscape of conveyance. And I've always thought it was interesting that Jack Chambers from London, Ontario, was also friends with Greg Curnow from London, Ontario, and with Kim Ondaatje from London, Ontario. They were all working, basically, they're talking about, in a lot of their work, vehicles of conveyance. And, Curnow, he died on his conveyance, a bicycle, but he painted all kinds of bicycles. The conveyance was always central to he loved being on the land on his bike, and it became a centerpiece. So this conveyance is really in us. We live in a huge country, and we move all the time. We're always on the road. We're always traveling. I just got back this morning from Niagara-on-the-Lake, because we'd been to see a couple of plays at the Shaw Festival. And you think you route carefully. I had to be back here by 2 o'clock, and so I had to take that 407 highway. But we had to think about doing that, because we're not always inclined to want to do that. We'd rather go through the countryside and see the things that really matter, rather than the speed. But conveyance occupies people who build ships and who build railroads. And it started me on this quest. I was fascinated by Van Gogh's painting, which appeared in the exhibition at the AGO a few years ago. You may have seen where they were trying, the curator, whose name escapes me right this minute, was trying to convey a notion of the birth of, or the importance of, industrialism to the Impressionists, including Van Gogh, who painted a train going across a bridge at Asnières in France, in Paris, 8 miles outside of Paris, in 1887, that she uses as an illustration for the industrialization that was creeping into France, even through the eyes of an artist we don't necessarily associate with industrialization. And I was fascinated by that, and I found a painting in Canada, painted also in 1887, by Lucius O'Brien, the first president of the Royal Canadian Academy, who was one of the famous railroad artists of 1880, following the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway. Two paintings about trains. His train, Lucius O'Brien's train, is a train that is coming across the Kicking Horse Pass in 1887 on a rail bed that was built probably in part by many of those Chinese laborers who died in the process of building that railroad. The railway itself is essential to Canada because it was a requirement of British Columbia's entry to Confederation that that railroad be completed. In my view, that railroad was a good deal more important to the world than the railroad that was described by Van Gogh. Yet we all know Van Gogh's work far better than we know our own Lucius O'Brien's work. But if you study Lucius O'Brien, you will find the very sensitive painter who was really interested in Indigenous people, who painted Indigenous people, who tried to understand cultures he saw but was not part of himself. These are the kinds of questions that started me thinking about the diversity of issues that we need to be considering when we look at a work of art. It's not just what you see, it's what the artist is saying about what he or she sees or they see that goes way beyond the actual image on the page, on the canvas. Sorry, I go on.
John always gives you homework. Did you make note of what you're supposed to go and look at? It's fine. It's one of the reasons why we come to John. I love that you talked about growth. Because one of the things that I know most in this show, I mean, I've known your work for a very long time. I kind of want to say thank you to Duncan Jackman, and I'm going to get you to talk about Duncan Jackman a little bit. I want to know, is he a patron? But growth, the thing that I was most emotional about this work is your growth since you closed your shop and stopped being a framer and were allowed to have the time to just work on your work and the abundance of work that came out of it. Your growth is phenomenal. Can you tell folks how Duncan Jackman's involved? Tell them a little bit about the process of that. And then can you talk about what it's felt like to make work specifically for this show and your growth?
It's a lot of questions.
Yep. I will remind if you miss a piece.
Okay, yeah. And Duncan Jackman is a gentleman who purchased one of my paintings quite a few years ago. I met him. I do a lot of art fairs in the course of a calendar year. It's so good to be back this year. Out of COVID, we're back in person. I do them because I enjoy getting it's a model I've chosen to disseminate my work, you might say. Get it out in front of as many people as possible is my theory, and you never know who you're going to be showing your work to. So a number of years ago, quite a few years ago now, I got a call after an art fair in Toronto. Somebody was asking if a painting was still available because her boss was quite interested in it. I said, yes, it is. They wished to purchase it. I said, I'm coming to Toronto so I could deliver it. I was given an address on University Avenue. And I go hiking down there, dressed as an artist in the summer, shorts, sandals, t-shirt, with this painting under my arm. I find the address on University Avenue and I'm escorted through security up to the top floor of the Empire Life Financial Building. And there I meet Mr. Jackman, lovely gentleman. We talk about the painting he purchased. He gave me a tour of the offices, and it's filled with beautiful Canadian art, antiques. We went into the boardroom. At the head of the conference table is a life-size portrait of John A. Macdonald standing there in ermine robes. He was the founder of the company, so it's been a very well-established Canadian company over the years. In the course of a conversation, I expressed my interest in the industrial landscape. He said one of their holdings was the Port Weller dry docks, which you'll see around here, and that might be something that I'd be interested in. I said, for sure. He arranged for me to go down. I spent a number of hours by myself going under the ships, in the ships, through the ships, above the ships, and just recording that whole experience. I mean, this was just like a candy store for me as far as inspiration goes. I completed that work. And then in 2019, again, at an art fair in Toronto, Mr. Jackman came up. He was touring the thing. We got chatting again, at which point he said, you know, by his invitation only, do they allow passengers on their ships, the Algoma Central Corporation, which is one of their holdings as well. Would I be interested? And I pondered for 3 seconds and said yes. So hence, that's where this whole series of paintings came from. So it's kind of a chronological view of the trip, starting at the Welland Canal, 5 days through the entire St. Lawrence system, right up to Port Cartier, delivering 30,000 tons of grain. The ship had come from Thunder Bay up the lakehead, delivering 30,000 tons of grain, which was then going to be transported at some point to North Africa, we assume. The ship would then load up the other side of the dock, you can see it here at Port Cartier, and fill up with iron ore to go back to the steel mills of Hamilton. We didn't take the return trip, we ended it there. And that was just such an experience of, it's a whole industry that I wasn't aware of as such. The crew, getting to know the crew members, and this ship is running 24/7. Watches being kept aboard this ship 24/7, round the clock. People are working and doing their assigned tasks. It's quite the thing. The locks are operating 24/7. We went through Montreal at starting 4:30 in the morning through the first lock, and by 8:30 we had been through Montreal 4 hours later through a series of locks there. Absolutely fascinating. What was the rest of the question?
So I want a yes or no. Is he a patron? Is he a patron?
Well,
In providing you that opportunity, is he a patron?
In a sense, I would say yes. Yeah, and just his initial interest, the painting he was interested in was a couple of ships in Toronto Harbor that were tied up there that I kind of snuck in through security to get photos of. And
Snuck in through security.
yeah, it happens.
And then can you talk a little bit about what's the growth been for you as a painter, closing the downtown shop, retiring, though that's a hilarious word in conjunction with you.
Great word. It hasn't changed much apart from allowing me, moving from downtown, closing the business. It also gave me a brand new studio, which is the most wonderful place to work, which I have. But it didn't change my work at all. It allowed me more time to paint, let's put it that way, which coincided beautifully with having the opportunity to put this exhibition together. But again, we were drawing quite a few pieces we're drawing on from the past, pulling them out and there's many more I could have, which are long gone, long sold, which I could easily have brought into this show because they speak of the same theme. And in a sense, it's the Canadian landscape. I came to really be aware of this as I was talking with John, as we were conversing about the essay that you had graciously taken up the challenge of researching and writing. And one of the things that you had mentioned in your research was founding that the Algoma Central Corporation, that included the Algoma Central Railway, which ran from Sault Ste. Marie and inland from there. And this is the railway that accommodated the Group of Seven when they went on their sketching, painting expeditions up Superior Way. And it was interesting because you had mentioned as they sat there looking at the beautiful unspoiled landscape that I would probably have been interested in turning around and seeing where that railway had come through. Some might have seen that as a vulgar intrusion on the landscape, but this is what fascinates me. You know, the rock cuts, maybe the boxcar that they traveled in sitting on a siding, and the activity that would have occurred throughout this period of just going in, and I think it was just built really to take out the resources that Northern Ontario offered in minerals and timber and wood. And it's such a young history that we have in this country, and just seeing how that infrastructure has presented itself and how we're able to move, and how it's enabled Canada to become what it is today through what we have. So as I look at the panorama of the Dofasco steel mill in Hamilton with its belching smokestacks, which are relatively clean by this point, but that to me is as much as a Canadian landscape as Lauren Harris's depictions of the mountains and the landscape of Northern Ontario. So that doesn't really explain growth, does it?
Please ask Pierre about growth later, because he's holding that one. And possibly, as the humble person that he is, it's an awkward thing to kind of answer. When I'm finished asking questions, are you then going to move the mic around and ask some questions? Can I have some closing words once you've finished that part? Okay, great. Uninhabited paintings. If you look at these images, you'll find that most of them are uninhabited. John has already referred to that. Pierre has also spoke about it. John used 4 words in a sentence: melancholy, loneliness, peace, and tranquility, in describing Pierre's work. Pierre, can I get you to say anything about your feelings about melancholy, loneliness, peace, and tranquility in your work?
Melancholy, loneliness, those are not bad descriptions. There can be a loveliness to that. And by loneliness, it's more of an aloneness with almost an intimacy with the image, in that you're alone in it, and it doesn't allow a distraction of although in some cases there are figures in it which are important to what I'm trying to say, but in a lot of cases there is an aloneness to the work, in that you can be, it locates you and really nobody else within what I'm trying to convey. So most of them I try and convey a certain, well, sometimes a melancholy feeling, peaceful, of course, and other words that you've used to describe it. But it's not a loneliness in that it's a bad thing. It's more of an aloneness that we're able to engage with the image that I'm depicting. Yeah.
And still, I'm going to relate it to Group of 7 work then, because we're in that situation where we're looking at these uninhabited paintings. I don't know much about uninhabited paintings. There's always figures in my boats. Oh, no, there's not. Probably why we're having a conversation. Can I give it to you and let you ask audience members? Yeah.
If anybody from the audience would like to ask a question or jump in with a comment, now is a great time. I can come to you with the microphone. You're welcome to just stand and share. And while you're thinking about, oh, great! I don't have to fill in the time. We're done.
My question's a little bit off the wall. Can I hear you?
Yeah, you sure can.
My name's Marty. I live in the house that you used to live in here at Dublin and Elba, which I think you had as a gallery. And I'm wondering if you actually ever painted there, because I suspect the light was not conducive to art there. But maybe that was before they planted all those huge maple trees that now border the house, and most beautiful orange there now that you should come and paint.
Well, thank you. Shall I use the mic?
Sure.
Thank you. That's a lovely. That situates us historically. That's where I first met John. You had your office on top of the hill in Care House, wasn't it? And I met John because Trent had been given a large collection of Victorian watercolors, which needed attention as far as framing and conservation went. And so I engaged with that, and I think that was our first meeting, and yeah, so long ago. But yes, I did start painting there. My first setup there, I had my easel in our bedroom. We had 3 children, and the first year we moved to Peterborough, we had 2 boarders in that house as well, just to help things along. It was vital at the time. But I painted in our bedroom until a time that, and I used to smoke at the time. This is what you did in your youth. And I remember painting and Laurie waking up, because I paint late at night. I worked evenings as a server at a lovely restaurant downtown, something else that we have in common as artists. Yeah. But I remember Laurie waking up one night and saying her eyes were stinging in our bedroom, because there I was painting with solvents and turpentines and mediums and smoking as well. I'm amazed we're still alive. At that point, I moved out in the hallway upstairs. Lighting was never a huge concern, still isn't. I now have a studio with a beautiful north window because I've been told that that's the best light for an artist, and it's lovely. But I still paint at night under artificial light, and suits me just fine. Later on, I moved my studio downstairs to a very small bedroom, and that worked for quite a few years, until it got to a time where I was trying to work a larger canvas, and I got so frustrated that I could barely move this canvas around in the space I was working. And at that point, I got a studio downtown in the Commerce Building up on the 2nd floor, and that was another instrumental move in my career as a painter. Suddenly I had a space where I would go there simply to work. There's no distractions of television or children or anything. I was there for one thing, and that was to paint. And so at that point, my career took another divergent path. Yeah, so maybe there'll be a plaque there someday.
When I first came to Peterborough, I came into your shop on George Street then, and somebody, I don't know if it was your wife or somebody else, gave me a little red picture of, what was the studio called? It was amazing.
The Williamson House.
Williamson House. Yeah, I remember that. I should know this. And it's just little red, and they gave that to me. And I actually just recently in Alberta on a trip there, I had it with me, and I had it framed in Alberta because I couldn't find. I won't say any more about that. So I have that piece, and that's the only piece that I have of you, the artist. But I've done something else.
My studio's open.
Hello, my dear.
Hi, Romina.
First of all, congratulations, it's stunning. And what I'd like to know is you've had time now to sit at this shelf for a couple of months. How do you feel about it? And where do you think you're going there?
Oh boy. It's wonderful coming down here. Every time I come down, it becomes, in a sense, more familiar, this grouping, this coming together of all these works. And it simply is so fulfilling, because they're all very meaningful to me, but it's completed a whole process of thought that I've been involved with for so many years now. But at the same time, it's led me to my very latest work. I'm working more with this photography and painting combination, and just having a ton of fun with it. Some things are working out better than others, but that's to be expected. But that's not where my work is exclusively going from now on. I'm still painting florals, and I mean, autumn scenes are probably going to be coming into my landscapes now as I walk my dog through Nichols Oval, and just what presents itself, again, is so inspirational. But this has become, gee, it's almost like visiting your children again, who you haven't seen for a while. It's not quite the same attachment, but there is, yeah. I think Spencer's nodding his head, and
You get to see it all together.
yeah.
Like in the studio, you can see one and another, but
I could never never get more than, I think 6 feet away from this painting when I had it standing in my studio, maybe 8 feet, but so I'd never, until it came down here, I'd never seen it in this kind of thing. Same with some of the other 10-foot wide paintings. There's simply nowhere in my studio to get a proper view of this. So that has just been a complete surprise and well, a joy to have it like this. Yeah, thanks, Rowena.
Yeah, it was really fun to be here that day when you got to see it for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was mentioned that you were born in Copenhagen.
Sorry again?
It was mentioned that you were born in Copenhagen.
Yes.
Do you think that's reflected in your work? When you work in particular? Is any of the feeling here?
That's I mean, I was very young when we came to Canada and settled here. I guess everyone is somehow affected by the culture they come from, and maybe my painting has carried on a European tradition of painting. I don't know. I don't think I could ascribe, and I've done paintings in Denmark. We've gone back to visit fairly often. We're in some ways unfortunate that our daughter lives in England, but fortunate that she lives in England because that has allowed us to travel. And if we're there, we often take a little scooch over to the continent. It's so easy to travel there. And I've been inspired often by painting in Denmark. A recent one, which could have been part of this show, I suppose. It was a painting of Central Station in Copenhagen with the commanding arches, the way European railway stations are. It's a painting I sold just this past summer, but I miss it terribly. But again, so I think we are influenced, obviously, by where we come from. But I don't think you could ascribe any Danish influence in my work as such, apart from the red and white. I mean, that's yeah. Yeah.
Thanks very much, everyone, for the questions. It's been really great, and I don't have to ask my question about restraint anymore. So let's get into that quite quickly. It's a fabulous show. It's, for me, it brings up many things. I was raised in Montreal on the docks because my father was a superintendent there for 10 years. And so these ships are embedded in my memory. My mother has boxes and boxes of photographs, just like yours, of ships from all across the country. What strikes me is, I'm 65, I would have been 5 years old, and they look pretty much the same. Like the history in terms of these modes of conveyance don't look that different. If you look at the 401 work by Jack Chambers, it looks very similar today, except I think there are more lanes. But, so I'm struck by, I think, the way things are, I don't want to say frozen in time, but similar to the way they have been, since the mid-20th century, early 20th century. These ships look almost archaic, but they actually look the same as they did then. Whereas photography work, I think, for me, emotionally, those feel quite different. And John, you spoke a bit about that in terms of the container ships. I've seen the Michael Winterbottom films about you know, migrants stuck in containers. And so there's something about the photography that brings the work into the present, although everything's in the present. It's just that the way it feels like things are more historical than they actually are. And you just took this trip. So I just wondered if you could talk a bit about the photography and the collage and how that's affected, I guess, you know, whether, I'm going to ask you whether or not it has affected your emotional relationship to the work.
Yeah. Thanks, Carolyn. That's a big question. There is a timelessness to what we're looking at in relation to the technology that we're looking at, ships and tugboats and things like that. The Algoma Harvester, which we were on board, is a fairly new ship. Algoma Central is revitalizing a lot of their fleet. So this is part of the Equinox class of lake freighters. They're built specifically to transverse the Great Lakes. As we enter the locks in the Welland Canal or any of the locks, there's 7 inches of clearance on each side of the ship going into the lock. Hence, you'll notice a few scrapes and scratches on the hulls of these things. But at the same time, I was fascinated talking to the chief engineer aboard this ship, which was built in China. Unfortunately, our shipbuilding industry of Canada can't compete with the shipbuilding industry overseas. But it has the fuel oil that they burn is bunker C or something, pretty dirty stuff. But they've now been equipped, the technology exists, that there are scrubbers that scrub the exhaust out of the ships, and so it's a lot cleaner. Not totally clean because we are burning this stuff, but a lot cleaner than it used to be. So that's encouraging to me as far as our ability to innovate, because we're not going to stop shipping grain and iron ore, anything like that. It's going to be a continuing. So again, I'm encouraged in that respect. Thank you for your observation about photography, because it does put it into, in a sense, more timely aspect, I think, than the painting. Painting can perhaps be read as, that could be many years ago, that could be many decades ago. It looked very similar, as you say. But the photography does put it into more of a here and now kind of thing, I think. And that's interesting, again, referring to one of the container ship down there. Now we're talking logistics and stuff. Somebody has to know where each of those, I think, upwards of 20,000 containers on board this ship. Someone has to know what's in there and where it's going. This absolutely boggles my mind. And the ability that we have now, as you mentioned, our globalized, the world has just become so much smaller because of this. So yeah, that does kind of present the work in a more contemporary fashion. And yeah, I'm happy to do that. It's another level of engagement that I'm able to do. And I must just add at this point even that I took great comfort with John in the course of our conversation. John revealed to me that in his youth, this is prior to entering the academy, I suppose, John worked in the steel mills of Hamilton for a period. So I think that's given you a certain insight into what we're dealing with visually here, and I appreciate that. Yeah. Mm.
And I'm actually going to turn it over to Spencer and let you say the things you want to say. Before I do that, though, I will just remind everyone that, please hang out. If you've got a question that you want to ask, here's really nice. And yeah, we will get the chairs out of the way so that you can enjoy the show as it ought to be enjoyed. And do feel free to join us upstairs for some refreshments. We've got a bit of a preview of the catalog body up there. And yeah, just enjoy. Thanks, guys.
In this catalog that we keep talking about, Pierre Christensen described this exhibition to John as my most recent step on the path to getting it right. If you think he's not a humble painter, I think that tells you that he is. And I think if you've spent some time with this work, you know that he is very much on the path to getting it right. Thanks, Pierre. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Spencer.